ensuring food safety and integrity from farm to table. So for this session, I would like to call our moderator, Rameez Daour, Food Consultant, Seafood. So Rameez Daour is an educator, researcher and public speaker specializing in food security, safety and nutrition, with degrees in clinical nutrition, food safety management and environmental health. She has authored 20 plus publications, contributed to WHO workshop and now advances sustainable farming and food security education at Seafood Dubai. So please give her a huge round of applause. Now it's time to call our panelists on stage with us. So the very first name is Bhaskar, Consultant, Agriculture, GCC. So my second name is Rohit, Vyas, Operation Engineer at Potager Farm. Come on, everybody, clap. Third name is Thea-Isabella, Business Development Expert and Sustainability Advocate Founder, Women in CEA. More louder for our beautiful ladies here. More louder. Yes. Professor Ioannis, University of Sharjah, UAE. Soren Kannik is the Minister Counsellor for Food, Agriculture and Fisheries at the Royal Danish Consulate General in Dubai.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having us today. So, as introduced, my name is Rameez. I work as a researcher and educator. Our focus is mainly food security education. So I'd like to introduce the panelists, but before that, I'd like to actually shed the light on our discussion for today. Today's session is quite, I would say, comprehensive in terms of it covers a bit of all the aspects that are needed in food security when we speak of farm-to-fork approaches. So we start off with the panel of how it explores in food safety and quality with regards to soil health, harvesting and vertical farming. We have a variety of different experts, those that are in agriculture, microbiology, technology, as well as those that are involved in policy and regulation in order to give us an insight of how farm-to-fork approaches contribute towards a more sustainable future. So, starting off with our first panelist, Bhaskar. So, first of all, it's very nice having you here today because as an agriculturalist specializing in open field as well as net house greenhouses, focusing in different regions, India and the GCC, focusing on top-line profitability, farm management and the technical aspects of the farm. With regards to vegetables and food production as a whole. So, to begin with you, Bhaskar, can you share your perspective on the present scenario of soil health? So what do you think are the present scenario of soil health across most farms, those that produce foods, and specifically those that supply foods to different entities?
Hello. Thank you so much. Thank you for the intro. Yes, we would like to collectively discuss on food resilience and also sustainability in terms of farm-to-fork solutions. See, the basic thought process that involves when you talk about food safety, you talk about post-harvest food safety. But as a grower in this region from the last, say, 30 years, I understand that food safety should begin with the soils or with the system that comes before the harvest, which is pre-harvest. So pre-harvest is a very important aspect in terms of food safety, food security as well, and of course nutritional security. So we always forget the word nutritional security when we talk these two have to go in tandem. So we'll be discussing over the panel today all these aspects that will contribute to better food safety and of course integrity of the farm who produces this food. See, when we talk of soils in this region are completely sodic soils. Yeah, they are not having any sort of organic matter content, nor any sort of organic carbon. So to enhance that, we need to develop the soil in such a way that it gives you a very healthy crop. So to do that, there are lots of practices that have to be followed. So over a period of time, let us get back to these and discuss individually how we mitigate these issues and get back to a very healthy product to feed the population.
And I believe also, Bhaskar, we need to also focus on the entire food chain ecosystem with regards not only to maintaining the soil health, but also to improving it. So what are your inputs on this particular, with regards to soil improvement in general?
In general, the practice here, I think I missed that part. The practice here is generally like, you just, in soil cultivation, you just till the land and add in some sort of organic manure, which is basically not heat treated, nor it has any sort of good microbial content in it, and then apply it into the soil and start producing, and once the crop is sown or is transplanted, then we add in lots of synthetic fertilizers to it, thus depleting the soil of its structure and its nutritive values. So the plant is not aware that it has to take up nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium, first thing. So it just takes up whatever is available in the crop, in the soil, in the root zone. And the second part of it is the biggest challenge is these nutrients are not in the available form. So they have to be broken down. So to break down these nutrients, which will be available for the plant physiology, has to have some sort of microbial activity in the soil. So these microbes, beneficial microorganisms, will break down these particular nutrients and it will be available only to the plant. So that's the thing which is lacking around. So once you have a healthy soil, you have a healthy crop. So ultimately, the soil health is very much needed. There are 4 to 5 aspects in that. One is the soil organic matter, the soil carbon. One we have the cation exchange capacity, and we also do have the water retention and the CN ratio. So if these 5 to 6 points or parameters are taken care of, then you will have a very beautiful world.
Amazing, and actually this brings us to a very important discussion, which is controlled environment, that we will shed the light on with Rohit. He is an operational engineer at a leading vertical farm at Berlin, over a decade of experience in agri. He trained at Oxford and Berlin, integrating sustainability strategy and operational excellence for climate-smart farming systems. So thank you, Bhaskar, for highlighting these protocols. It is very much indeed. Now, moving on to Rohit with regards to controlled environments specifically, how do you think farm-to-table model ensure higher food security over global supply chains?
Hi, Namaskar and Salam and thanks a lot for the introduction. First of all, what I would like to say is that keeping agriculture apart, if we see from a pure supply chain perspective or a value chain perspective, the more steps in the supply chain you have, the more are the chances of it being getting interfered in different or multiple steps. So in local farm to fork model, what we are focusing on that the site of production should be as close to the consumer so as to eliminate all the different steps of vertical and supply chain in order to minimize the risks of getting your food contaminated or adulterated at any stage in this entire value chain. Having been said that, safety also comes in 2 steps levels. For example, like in general, for any safety precautions, it should be preventive as well as curative.
Exactly, I was going to highlight on this. What are preventative measures? Not only to treat it once it's already contaminated. However, what preventative measures can we do to ensure the consistency over the quality?
Yeah. So to answer that, preventive measures should be not by chance, but by design, I would say. And by that what I mean is that the systems should be designed in a way that at every step you ensure that especially after COVID pandemic, I would say, you should ensure that the highest quality and safety standards are maintained. Like, say, for example, what we do at Potager, at our farm facility in Berlin, is that we ensure all our staff being well trained of how they have to use the equipments, cleaning the tools, surfaces, and even the sensors if they are exposed to any kind of environment which may lead to growing of any kind of bacteria or pathogens. So that's the first thing which acts as a preventive shield. Whereas for the curative, again, when I say we disintegrate the entire supply chain into a very small, quick to respond supply chain kind of thing where the producers and the consumers are very close to each other, it gives us a chance of having a very small feedback loop in a way so that the information quickly flows back from the customer back to the producers immediately, and then you can take the curative steps as well very efficiently. In contrast to that, in global supply chains, what we usually see is that the food being produced in one part of the world, by the time it gets consumed in some other part of the world, you also have the issues of the feedback loop getting too elongated for the information flow to actually reach to the producers and then take the curative actions.
Makes sense. So you're trying to say here that we can also follow, by following, I would say, safety protocols that are needed accordingly in a consistent manner, we can assure that the outcome is definitely guaranteed, or I would say we would reduce possible risks of contaminations accordingly. So there are safety protocols that are followed.
Definitely. I mean, no one can say 100% surely that everything is, even in controlled environment agriculture, everything will remain pathogen-free, bacteria-free. But then that's the best chance what we can take forward.
That's great for shedding the light, because the thing is, at times people, when they hear controlled environments, that it is guaranteed 100% any crop can grow at any phase. But controlled environments also, there are many benefits of it, I believe, but it has to be done by those who are experts, those who know very well, such as yourself, how to, what are the exact requirements accordingly, because in the regions, of course, it differs, but at the end of the day, we all have one aim, increasing the yield with towards more secure and sustainable future. Now, a transition back to Bhaskar, because you highlighted a very important point. You've highlighted protocols in controlled environments. So, Bhaskar, do you think these innovations influence harvest with regards to soil health? Like, for example, such innovations that Rohit have discussed, would they add value to the soil health, or to the soil health improvement, I would say?
Yeah, in general, you see, when we talk about soil health, we talk about open field cultivation. We also can talk about controlled environment agriculture, whereby, in this part of the world, they are not only doing it in hydroponics or in a media-based cultivation, they are also doing it in the soil. So, I want to pick up a point from where this gentleman said, is that, see, the whole structure of the facility of this controlled environment agriculture is not a foolproof. There is always a chance of any sort of pathogen inside the system. So it is preventive. Apart from preventive, it is some sort of biological security, biosecurity that you have to put in place. Apart from that, when people say or have this notion that it is CEA produced, so it is pathogen-free or residue-free, I don't accept that. And it's a well-known fact that there is a level of pests and disease incidence in the crop or in the facility. So it has to be kept under threshold. So because the climate is such that you have got ample temperature, humidity, all sorts of conditions for the pathogens also. So there you have something called a threshold. It has to be kept within the threshold. So that, keeping that within threshold gets you into some sort of preventive mode.
Exactly. So it's not only the soil health, but also the harvest, at harvest level. So like the point of it's a collaborative approach from soil quality to harvest, it's all with the...
It's the total value chain from seed, from sowing to the harvest to the table. So basically, I'm in this industry for the last so many years. I usually say, when you talk about food safety, I would like to stress again, it's also the nutritional security of the food, which will give you that type of nutrients that people are looking at.
Exactly, it's quality. Cost is just part of the story. The yield is just part of the story, but there are many other aspects in terms of the quality, the nutrition, the nutrients, the practices that we develop accordingly. Thank you so much for your inputs. I would like to now move on to Tia. So being a business development expert in sustainability and in agri-tech and circular economy, so you also have a very major contribution in female founder empowerment. So those are founded like across many professionals. So we would really like to have your input to build on the discussion. How can agri-tech and circular economy work together in order to reduce waste while also improving food safety and quality?
Hi, yes, thank you so much for having me today. And for this very small question to begin with. I think overall agri-tech can support us into moving in a more circular economy environment by all the data it is collecting. So with all the innovations that we're having in agri-tech, and particularly everything that is coming new to the market, I think we've heard over the past few years more and more the topic of AI. AI doesn't work if I don't have any data. And so circular economy means that we're valorizing as much as possible each step throughout the whole value chain. In order to know what I want to optimize, I need to have data about it. So I need to understand where is the waste in order to be able to improve it. So I think that's how all the agri-tech innovations are playing towards a more sustainable future. Because in the end, sustainability is also people, planet, and profit, meaning I serve the planet and the people, but I still make money from it. So optimization plays into that, and that can be enabled by the data that we're gathering. And perhaps because you just mentioned the female founders, I always love to give also a case study, and I like a startup here in the UAE, actually in Dubai, called the Waste Lab. So what they do is they collect waste from hotels and restaurants all across the city and then turn it into high-value compost. But what's actually the very interesting value proposition they're having is that they not only produce a product that's of high value, they also collect data. And they separate the data between food waste and food loss to then give actually advice to the hotels and restaurants and tell them what days they could actually fill up their buffets or whatever with less produce in order to reduce waste along the way. So that data really helps them to make recommendations in order to be more sustainable.
Amazing. So shedding the light also on data-driven approaches and how this works with regard to data-driven, because Rohit and Bhaskar shared from a technical aspect how monitoring quality is very important, and this has to be applied or implemented onto data in order to be able to follow up and monitor accordingly. So it's really worth mentioning as well, have you come across, it's really interesting, I'm biased now with the female aspect, but have you come across, I would say, professionals with regards to female founders that are driving innovation in vertical farming and sustainable food systems? You've mentioned waste, but in general, how are you seeing the approaches with regards to, because at the end of the day, honestly, when females or the caregivers, if they are well educated about all these aspects, then the entire family is. So this is very important to shed the light on how is the contribution with regards to the female, I would say, like collective innovations. How do you align that with vertical farming and sustainable farming aspects?
I think first and foremost, women have always been part of the agriculture system, and I think even today we still see that smallholder farms are mainly driven by women, and without them there wouldn't be a lot of food on the table. So it's important to acknowledge that. What is exciting about vertical farming in CEA is that, one, we actually see a lot of female employment, not only in founders, but in scientists, in head growers, all across the industry. But also we see a lot of other people getting excited about it. And I think that's something that's really great, is that we suddenly have a big mix of people in terms of maybe engineers, people from IT, actually marketeers that are getting into this industry, opening maybe a vertical farm. We can discuss about the fact whether that's good or bad and whether they succeed or not. But it's great to see that a lot more people are getting interested in agriculture production, in food production, understanding the food system. And those are groups of people that usually would never understand like the bubble that we're sitting in today. And then maybe secondly, around women in CA and what we drive, I've been traveling a lot between continents and conferences and met a lot of great and smart women in this industry. And they've always been a little bit like, oh, I'm the only woman in the company, because maybe everything is very engineer driven, so very male dominated. And I was like, but you're not the only one in the industry. So it actually just occurred naturally. We just met up online, and now we have this network of almost 300 women all across the industry. And what we're trying to do is to foster collaboration, and these women again have massive networks. So what we're trying to do is really connect them and have them start projects between the companies.
Amazing. So actually, Tia, you're more or less shedding the light on a lot of important aspects, but one of them is worth mentioning is that it's an approach that is holistic and needed from everyone. So if each one of us takes a step, then there is results. So amazing for the collaborative effort. I'd like to now move on to Prof. Ioannis. It is very important to have an academia input. Prof. Ioannis has a PhD in chemistry and microbiology. He supervised more than 35 master's and 3 PhD theses and 100 plus papers, being one of the leading food biochemists and ranked among Swedish biochemical scientists since 2020. Prof. Ioannis is also my master's supervisor previously when I did my master's degree, so it's really worth mentioning your expertise. He is the person who I've learned with, and I've gotten into food safety because of him. So he mentored my entire thesis. So Prof. Ioannis, I'd like to shed the light on traceability and food safety culture. So tell us, what do you think the role of traceability is in securing farm-to-table approaches, and some inputs from academia that we can definitely learn from?
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Rameez. I'm thrilled to have you as my moderator, and that means I've done my job quite well. So I'd like to perhaps thank the organizers for inviting me to this interesting venue, and I acknowledge it and appreciation. My third point before I go into traceability is that why is academia important? Because most of you studied, you probably were students, and this is where transfer of knowledge takes place. Academia prepares the next leaders in business and marketing, in understanding agriculture and understanding what is food safety. I'll say a little bit about food safety. Most people actually do not distinguish between food security and food safety. When I'm asking my students, what is more important? Is it first security of food or food safety? Of course, the answer is some of them are probably trying to guess. What is security, for example? They understand to secure is something to have it. So once you don't have food, you're not practically talking about food safety. Because if you don't secure food, there's no point in having food safety. So is it food safety or food insecurity? So we're here to just have a few ideas about food safety, food security. So food security comes first, but how important is it that food safety of that secured food is of utmost importance? It is very important. So food safety to the most consumers will probably don't mean a lot, but if you tell them about bacteria or say pesticides, that might ring a bell. Now, traceability. Traceability is a very important issue. Why is it important? Well, it's not important in Beirut, or I would say perhaps downtown Beirut, because when I was in Beirut 10 years ago, I used to buy my groceries just around the corner, which was apples in fall. And what's the point of tracing apples just around the corner, right? And Beirut is actually, although having problems with various issues, relies on local produce. But what about UAE? What about Saudi Arabia? What about Gulf? What about this region that is actually depending on food imports? How important is traceability? It is absolutely important in securing food in providing food and food that is safe. So traceability, Rameez, is of utmost importance over the last, say, 10 or perhaps a little bit more in safeguarding the consumer's health. Because how do we actually guarantee that the French cheese coming from France is without Listeria monocytogenes? Bear in mind that even in the United States 6 months ago, within the United States, we had an E. coli food safety instance, and it's all over the news at McDonald's, right? What was it, the burger? No, it was not the burger, it was the onions. So traceability actually helped finding a food recall. It wasn't the minced meat because it was probably received a lot of treatment, but it was the onions that actually led to food poisoning, resulting in human losses. So traceability is very important at food recalls, at outbreak. Could be an outbreak is defined in food safety more than 2 consumers having the same kind of symptoms. Also, it's important in compliance, also labeling, right? What does the label mean for a consumer? And also confidence, right? When you trace a food product, how do you actually maintain that this label is the one that was about, say, a month ago? So traceability is definitely something from farm to fork that needs to be respected, and also along with the cold chain refrigeration to guarantee, safeguard the consumer's health, either at home or in a food court or wherever.
Speaking of health and safety, Prof. Ioannis, how important do you think is the concept of food safety with regards to the comparison between, a lot of us don't know the difference between safety and quality with regards to food. So how would you think food safety culture assures product quality, freshness, and overall safety? So is there like a line where we would say safety is a thing and quality is a thing in order for precautions to be made accordingly?
That's a very good point, Rameez. Even nowadays, when I'm talking to my master's students, I'm trying hardly to just explain to them between quality and safety. Something that is quality does not guarantee safety. You can have a good quality milk, but it might have, obviously we don't want a sterilized milk. Okay, we want, and I will go on to that a little bit on my final point, not right now. Why is it important to have bacteria? We want bacteria to be present. In other words, a good quality milk will have a very good low population of bacteria present. So we're talking about good quality, but we want it safe. So food quality overlaps with food safety, and food safety cannot do without food quality. We're talking about overall food safety, which entails and incorporates within its component food quality. Food quality obviously would go into things like control. We control, but we don't guarantee that it's safe. And freshness and also nutrition are all very related. But the whole concept is interrelated. We cannot differentiate just quality from food safety. But the overall take-home message is that we want a product that is overall food safe, safety.
Amazing. Thank you for your insights, Dr. Ioannis. I believe we are all learning from this panel. It's good to have refreshers from the point of harvest until it reaches to the table. You have shared a lot about how culture, or I would say traceability, is foundational. Tia, I would like, yes, anything to add?
Can I just add a couple of points, please? Okay, 1 minute. You asked me about food culture. This is coming up to the US now over the past 2 or 3 or 5 years. Food safety culture concerns the very first worker understanding what is salmonella, right up to the CEO manager. Why does the company need to have the same brand value and quality to be maintained? So it's absolutely of utmost importance to maintain food safety culture, imperative for business profits.
Great. I'd like to just highlight one point with Tia prior to moving, because you've mentioned traceability. So, Tia, do you think emerging markets what ways can emerging markets do to adopt the acceleration of sustainable farming, not only amongst, I would say, at female level, but in general at the founders, female founders. Do you think from your exposure, because you have a lot of exposure to global traceability, what are some basic inputs that people can add, or ways, I would say, take-home messages that we can follow with regards to global traceability?
I think, first and foremost, to add to your comment, it's true the overlap between food safety and food security, and having the definitions in mind is something that I see a lot of confusion happening. Same with self-sufficiency. Gets mixed up a lot with food security. And in terms of food safety, what we see, for instance, in Europe is that we have the mantra safety first, so better safe than sorry. While in the US, it's the other way around. Everything is safe until proven different. So coming back to your question, I think what I mainly see in emerging markets is that they're adopting a lot of technologies, a lot of knowledge they see elsewhere working. And I think that's something they can really leverage, is that do not make the same mistakes that we've seen in other markets. Learn from their mistakes, adopt the technologies that are working, and make sure that it's working for your environment, it's working for your consumer culture, it's like the growing method of crops is working for your climate. All those different points, like other people have made a lot of mistakes. And I think the opportunity that I see in emerging markets is to adopt technologies and to be faster because of that.
Amazing, thank you for your inputs, Thea. So now we move into Soren. He is the Minister, Counsellor for Food, Agriculture and Fisheries at the Royal Danish Consulate. So being with nearly 2 decades of international experience and advanced experience in sustainable agriculture, and all towards strengthening food systems and resilient food systems. So building on the discussion that we're currently having, Soren, from a regulatory perspective, what would you think are the key pillars for ensuring food safety and integrity from farm to fork? It is very worth mentioning the regulatory aspect of each discussion in order to have a holistic picture of what improvements can we do accordingly. Yes.
I can try this one. So are we all up there? And thank you so much for the question. I've been really looking forward to participating here today, and I must say that I've been here since the morning, and it's been an interesting engagement. I learned a lot. So Denmark has one of the most stringent and transparent food safety systems in the world. Many of you see Danish products. You go to the supermarkets and other places, and it's basically a brand. The key 3 pillars that the Danish model goes on is basically science-based regulations, a strong public-private collaboration, and a traceability, as you also rightly mentioned, throughout the value chain, because we are all in it together. So when we talk about, say, farm to fork, it's everything from, of course, as Mr. Bhaskar said in the beginning about soil health, it actually goes beyond that. It goes to the groundwater. It goes into the groundwater, so if you have chemicals in the groundwater due to chemical agriculture, it implements the crops, which then implements the feeds, which then implements the animals, which then implements the meat. So traceability is the key. So we need to go deep down to ensure that you have safe and secure foods for the whole population. So that is also why that we in Denmark, due to the strong traceability and the brand of food made in Denmark, each farmer gets fully compensated. So there's a big trust between government and farmer in Denmark, because the farmer knows, okay, if I'm producing cattle or if I'm producing milk and I have a sick cow, or I have salmonella in a chicken, which we haven't had for the last 10 years. We have had no salmonella in Denmark. We have eradicated it. Because the farmer knows the moment they detect the disease, they report it immediately and the whole thing is put down and they get compensated. So they don't have any motivation to try to hide it away. And that I think is so important that many times the farmers is their livelihood. And they will try to make do, and many times, especially farmers in this part of the world. I just finished a tenure of 6 years in India, where we know how difficult it is for the smallholder farmers to survive. So we need to build a system, as we did in Denmark, where you have a high level of trust and cooperation, and you know that we're all in it together. If a farmer is afraid that he will lose money if he reports something, it suddenly spin out of control, as I would assume you would agree that if you do not have traceability and you don't lock down, say, disease outbreak and other things, it can turn nasty really fast.
Indeed, it's a process, I believe.
It's a process, it's because we're all in it together, right? It goes straight into, if you put chemicals in the ground that end in the groundwater that you use to feed the crop, it doesn't matter what you do after that. Right?
So, because you mentioned it's a process and we're all in it together, but at the end of the day, as experts, our role is how do we translate all the information that we've learned from the background, whether it's technical, theoretical, into the consumer level or the audience. So, in your perspective, consumer trust plays a role in ensuring food safety, but how can authorities foster this trust?
But it's basically being independent and having a strong cooperation, public-private cooperation, to build that trust that we understand that we as a community are in it together, we as a sector are in it together. If we lose the trust, we all lose out. So that is why it's very important to have a strong, independent regulator that instills trust, that is not somehow relying on others. So, and I'm very happy that we of course, Denmark have a very high trust to each other, and we believe in basically doing the right things because we know it will not have negative impact with us when we raise the alarm.
Indeed, indeed. It's very important always let's say, align it with different entities in terms of regulatory aspects, in terms of aspects of those who are at the farm level, because if it wasn't at a collaborative approach, we wouldn't understand after the process is over or after I'm done with my role, what's next, or what was before I hold it in. So thank you, Soren, for sharing these inputs. Thank you very much. We will get back to you with a final question. But before that, I would like to also, now since we're talking about the technologies, and we're talking about from regulatory aspects and different aspects, related to modern, I would say, modern innovation. So Prof. Ioannis, in your insight, you highlighted the need for traceability in general, and you highlighted how it's important in food safety and quality. However, where do you think with regards to preservation technologies, how are diverse and how can we promise safer foods, and why do we still see pathogens threatening, although we have many modern technologies around? And what is your input, even in not necessarily like different countries, but I would say as a modern consumer?
Right, that's a great point and question. We're advancing in preservation food processing technologies, but at the same time, let me just give you a couple of numbers. We're seeing 1 in 3 consumers in the United States to suffer from foodborne illness annually. That means 100 million illness outbreaks, not necessarily lethal, but sending someone to the hospital. It means loss in terms of the company profits, and out of this, US about 330 million. So you're talking about 1 in 3 individuals suffering from a foodborne illness. And that means waste in terms of business. But seriously, and of utmost concern, is that we have 5,000 cases of fatalities, I mean, people dying. So, as Soren said, they've eradicated salmonella, but salmonella is still around in a lot of countries in the world because it's more abundant, perhaps with more chicken, or perhaps dairy produce. The good thing is that we're being able now, with emerging technologies, to somehow reduce these incidences. However, it must be pointed out that we will never be able to eliminate microbes. Microbes have existed 7 billion years ago, and this is not the point of business. There's no business that would like to sell sterilized foods. Why? Because where would your microflora, which is very important, and coming on to that, allow me please a couple of minutes. When we come to life, the baby is crying because of the building of the microbiota in the gut microflora. So it takes up to about 6 to 8 weeks until the baby builds lactic acid bacteria. You're the nutritionist, you know how important is lactic acid bacteria. So what I'm saying is, if we have sterilized foods, we're not getting any microflora. So yet scientists are not able to tell what is the role of the gut microbiome in combating infections. We know virtually very little, but very important. If you have a strong immune system that is building your gut microflora with probiotics and nutrition, okay, you can combat foodborne infections. So summing up, we cannot treat the microbes. We have accidental fatal errors in industries occurring, the human factor, and importantly, the microbes are more clever than us. They have adaptation technologies that we don't have. They survive without oxygen. We cannot even survive in not even 30 seconds. And the last thing and utmost is that at the consumer's level, education. Education right from the primary school in washing hands properly. If you ask the average consumer, they don't even know how many seconds and how well they should wash their hands overlapping their fingers. And that should be a home message right from primary school, because food handling starts from farm and it ends up on a consumer plate. So
indeed, it's like we're focusing mainly on not only the outcome, but also the exact source of how the process went. It's not like that you have a job and you get it done, but how was it done exactly in such a way that we don't only do it, but also we educate about it. Because at the end of the day, those future farmers or the future experts, and by farmers I'm referring to students actually, because we are doing, I come from an educational background, and we focus on doing sessions that allow them to experience what is farming. Because definitely vertical farming and sustainable farming is the future, but it's important for them to also acknowledge how did farming start from the very first point, from your ancestors, what is the traditional farming methods that started, and then we get them into sustainable farming techniques. Because as children, getting directly into the complex ways of growing, they wouldn't care about the benefits of these. They would care about what the processes to enjoy. And accordingly, we go like, okay, so these are some farms, this is how a traditional farming goes, and this is how a vertical farming, or I would say an aeroponic is. So how about we see the comparison? And then I dig more into, okay, it saves a lot of water, so it saves our planet, it's for food security purposes, but we cannot directly overlap, like bombard them, I would say, with a lot of knowledge, just highlighting your additional point, Prof. Ioannis.
Yeah, just a closing remark. It's very important right from kindergarten or primary school. I'm sure that this is happening in Denmark, in educating primary school teachers or children at the family level, food handling, and how important is bacteria. The average consumer doesn't know what bacteria. We fight bacteria. No. The question is, bacteria are beneficial for us. They should not be seen as targeting them with antibiotics. We should love them, we should respect them, and if they coexist with our natural balance, we don't have any reason to just be afraid of bacteria. In other words, we do everything to live with them, be in balance with them, but that requires education right from the beginning.
So, highlighting to your point, Prof. Ioannis, before I move on with the closing remark with each of the panelists, I'd like to ask Soren, what do you think, since you have spoken a lot about the innovations and technologies, are there specific ones modern, I would say, that are in Denmark that are exploring or implementing to strengthen this particular aspect or food integrity, I would say?
Well, Denmark is a front runner in digital solution and traceability, so it's basically a matter of both using the blockchain-enabled technology, but also basically using veterinary surveillance, having data from the farms itself, monitoring the health of the cow. And I very much agree with you that bacteria is the way of the future in many ways, also when it comes to good soil health. So we need pre and probiotics, not just for growing our food, but also for ourselves, which will give us a stamina to stand against it. I think the whole sterile case where everything needed to be boiled and washed in vinegar before being eaten is not something that is very good in the long term. And I also think that COVID taught us a lot of lessons about how to keep our hands clean. And also in Denmark, we've done something that was a little funny to start with about 20 years ago. So my colleagues in the Danish Food and Veterinary Agency, they went around to all the restaurants and they audited them. And if they had everything under control, they got a happy smiley sticker. If they had problem, they got a sad smiley. And then if it was okay, they got like a smiley. Now that smiley was sitting in the restaurant for 3 months until they could be re-audited. So definitely, very few restaurants would get a sad smiley or an angry smiley twice, because it costs business and it costs trust. So that's a very thing. I remember many years ago I started a food wholesaler in the Maldives with import from 20 countries, and I took it over from an existing thing. And the first thing I did was, of course, I introduced hazard, which back in 2005 was unheard of. And the whole industry got so angry with me because suddenly the restaurants and so suddenly the hotel has a source of hazard certified food products. And then all my competitors had to do the same. But for me, it was normally when you run a Danish company, you need to have a health analysis, a critical control point, you need to have a temperature control, all that you need to have under control. So I just copied what we did in Denmark. But it was not very popular because it raised the bar for all my competitors that suddenly they had to do the same. But I think that most people that go on holidays in Maldives now are pretty happy that I did that.
So they're not, you've raised the bar for a lot of them, so.
Yeah, because suddenly they also needed to have cool change. Suddenly they also needed to have reefer vans that picked up from the harbor. Suddenly they also needed to do temperature control. Suddenly they also needed to change their wooden pallets to plastic one. You know, there was a lot of extra cost in something that I thought were common sense, because you don't want to make your customers' business in jeopardy, right?
And that's exactly what I mean by it starts with the staff. So this is a real life example of he took the step, but now everyone has to. So by like your competitors and so on. So it starts with the very first step, and collaboratively we all can do it. And this is very good, honestly, to hear from someone who with such extensive experience in the regulatory framework, because you would be so much aware, and a lot of experiences have come across which are like this implementing in terms of implementation. Thank you so much, Prof. Ioannis and Soren, for sharing your remarks. I'd like to move on to the rest of the speakers with a closing remark. In brief, this was very important with regards to knowledge aspect. But Tia, do you think there are any collaborative approach for modern, I would say, startups and innovations to work on that I would say like agri-food tech solutions can pilot project to? Anything that is modern, just as a closing remark for future innovations?
Maybe also first about Soren's remark. I really like the Scandinavian approach that you support the farmers for reporting the issue. In Germany, we rather have the problem that once there is an outbreak, well, you cannot have any livestock in your barns for the next 4 years. So, you know, that's maybe how we can learn from each other. In terms of establishing partnerships, I think we had this a little bit on the last panel as well, is that we need to invest in R&D, we need to invest money into these very young startups that are trying to innovate, even though there's going to be a lot of trial and error and a lot of learning and perhaps a lot of failure, but a few So I see a lot of potential in terms of collaboration between startups, larger corporations, SMEs that are established in certain markets that have certain power, but also not to forget the government and have them included in the discussions, because one of the main problems I've been seeing, specifically with vertical farming at CA, is they've been trying to alienate themselves from agriculture with their own vocabulary, with their own trade shows and conferences, and their own discussions, while they're actually part of the bigger agriculture ecosystem. And so if we look, or we always criticize that vertical farming has not the best unit economics. However, if you look at Europe or the American farmer, none of them would be profitable without subsidies. So including the government into this is so paramount in order for future success. And so, yeah, I think in the end, it is the interplay between young innovation, you know, these like small things that we're seeing, small innovation that can make a great impact, supporting them throughout their journey, having large corporations with international power included, and then the government as
so it's mainly collaborations, as you just mentioned. So it's a collaboration, whether it's between private and governmental entities, or whether it is
100%.
between academia and industry. So it's collaborative approaches. Thank you for shedding the light. So this brings us to, if we are speaking of development and innovation, we need to understand what are they with regards to modern vertical farming. So bringing up the point to Rohit, technology and innovation is indeed very, very central. But how would technology actually support us in terms of building traceability and consumer trust, but specifically in modern farming? So let's say we are translating it to different types of audiences, but we have to deliver the message that it is modern farming. So what's your input on that, being an expert in vertical farming?
First of all, I would again like to remind all other panelists, Soren, Professor, as well as Thea, that in a way what every agri-startup wants to do, especially vertical farming startups, is that they just alienate themselves, as rightly put out by Thea. And in doing so, what we do is we actually miss out on so many good things which other people are doing in the same industry, which can be employed in our own startups, but just because, to make it an ego issue, I would say, on the industry itself, or using different terminology, what we do is we just refrain ourselves from that. Also, one of our previous panelists said that the return in the agri-tech startups is the worst in comparison to other startups like fintech, blockchain, or IT, or other things. And again, the answer lies here that because all other industries are working in tandem with each other, that whatever others are doing, everyone is learning from them. Whereas in agriculture, everyone, to give an analogy, everyone thinks that, okay, it's my child, so I should love only my child and not others. So if you ask a vertical farming startup enthusiast, you will say, oh, okay, this is the future. You ask someone who do completely organic farming, you will say, okay, this is the future. You ask a modern so-called maize cultivator or corn cultivator from Bay Area or California in US, you would say, oh no, you know what is, this is the future, because you have to feed a big population. But at the end of the day, everything what trickles down is that everyone is just doing harm to each other and not collaborating with that. And then to bring on to, or add on to your question, that what kind of technologies or innovations would be helpful? Again, to take a lesson from all these things, even like if you would have asked me this question 2 days back, I would have said something about very innovative technology like automatic pathogen detection, or something like telling you where exactly in the value chain to trace it down where exactly the problem occurred, or something like that. But today, more so ever, I feel that okay, the agricultural domain is doing most of the things in, if we see the general PDCA cycle of any process like plan, do, check, act. Everything is doing perfectly. Do, check, and act. We are doing the things, we are checking the things, and we are acting. We need more innovations in the planning phase. By that I mean we need more, for example, women entrepreneurs like Mom. She knows exactly what spices, what condiments, and what other ingredients have to be used to make tasty as well as fulfilling, right? In the same way, we need people to innovate more in a planning phase wherein we bring on all these small innovations which are happening all across the globe in different small startups to bring it together and then make a system of systems in itself wherein we can say, okay, this is not the final solution, but it is one of the solutions which accompanies all others along.
Very nice. It's actually very well put in a way that it is an approach that is needed to align with what latest technologies and innovations are. So a greenhouse that is built right now is definitely not like a greenhouse that was built 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We have all these dripping systems, AI, and different technologies that are aligning an entire different system. Indeed, and which makes our life way easier, but it's definitely a process that happens, and it's from different, I would say, efforts from different entities, and not only a solo effort. Thank you for sharing your input. Now, closing with Bhaskar. Now that we have a lot of technologies, innovations that we've discussed, how do we secure, from a nutritional perspective and from a food safety perspective, I would say at a farm level, noting that it is not only food safety, but also you mentioned previously that it is from a nutritional part that we have started with nutritional security into food safety and food security. So what are some modern ways that we can take care of, in brief, as a take-home message with regards to the balance between nutrition and food?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up from Soren. But yes, the part 2 of soil contamination, when you're talking about adding of nutrients, synthetic nutrients to the soil, because of a very poor soil microbiome, there is no breakdown, there is no uptake by the plant, so it seeps into the groundwater. So that also hinders in food safety. That's number one. Number two, we're talking about technologies. Yes, there are lots of technologies. HACCP is mandatory in some parts of the world, and even here it's mandatory. Then you have good agricultural practices which are being done on the farm level. But the main thing which is lacking around here, I would say, is the intent and the honesty with which you are implementing those protocols. See, when you're talking about implementation of HACCP, the person who is implementing it or the whole team has to be sanitized, has to be aware. So there comes the biggest question of capacity building. Skill development, capacity building, training, especially at farm level, is very, very essential. We need to have more trainings to the farmers, the growers, who will in turn implement all those parameters which have been specified by academia and also by the ministry, of course, and also by the policymakers. Otherwise, it will not work out. We will be in the same loop of having issues with salmonella, etc.
So, like bridging the gaps.
We have to bridge the gap. It is not only the last mile connectivity, but
from the point. And that's actually the point of this entire discussion: traceability across the entire food system.
Yes, it is the entire food system, starting from the farm.
From the farm,
yeah.
Exactly.
With skill development and training, which is completely lacking in most parts of the farm.
Very, very well said. Thank you, Bhaskar, and thank you for the rest of the panelists. It was great, honestly, sharing insights from different levels: academia, technology, innovations, and farming, and agri. And this is exactly what is needed in order to assure, I would say, and contribute